The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer, brought to you by Osseo Gear. It's unfortunately, Don, episode 163, which will be the last Chasing Giants podcast we ever release for everyone.
Yeah, it's been a good run, but it's all over now.
Happy April Fools.
I knew where you was going with that one.
Yeah.
We're recording on Saturday, April Fool's Day, so hopefully we didn't get too many people fired up.
Yeah, we're probably got a bunch of people looking at each other right now, listening to this, and the ones that listen in a group anyway. But thanks for all the support. Thanks for coming back this week. We got a good show. If you remember last week, we ran a little bit long, and we have a really good question. It's going to be the first one of the day about some trees. I want to spend a lot of time on that. I have a big announcement for Lester's Feet Foundation that we're going to talk about. And I guess let's just rehash the last week a little bit. Don, you had an exciting week traveling and got a nice little airplane ride, if I heard right.
Yeah, I did. Had I guess I'm going to call him a business partner now, a new business partner. Flew his jet in, picked me up locally. Then we both flew to Ohio to look at some properties with my other business partner. I'll leave their names out of it for their own protection. They may not want to be associated with me publicly anyway. But yeah, we looked at 3 different properties. We're looking to expand what we've been doing there as far as buying and developing and then reselling properties. And we looked at some really good ones. And I'm telling you that there's a couple of them that are going to be hard to let go of just because they're in great areas, and I don't want to give everything away, but they butt up to some really special places. So got a lot in the works there. I did another consulting visit yesterday. I guess it was Friday. An old client of mine that had bought a new piece of ground, and he was back and forth on what he wanted to do with some different parts of that property. So I went and did that yesterday. But sounds like you just got in from a consulting trip yourself.
Yeah, I left last night to go back down. I don't think the people in that area call it Western Kentucky, but from the area I live in, it's Western Kentucky. It's down around the Bowling Green area. We just got some great friends and support and listeners of the podcast down in that area, and I've gotten quite a few jobs down there to help people with their farms. So today was my last visit. 2 brothers own a couple pieces of property and wanted me to look at both of them. And I had already cut it off, but as a favor to these guys, I know they're listening right now. They had a really big project they wanted to do and wanted another set of eyes on it before they invested the amount of money and time into doing big projects on the 2 tracks. So I've worked it in, luckily, with the schedule working out. I'll tell you, though, it's starting to green up. The trees are budding, the understories, blooming out. Today was actually youth season of turkey hunting. So I saw and heard a couple shots early this morning. But spring is definitely here. But I'm glad to have consulting season over. I really enjoyed it, but people don't understand how much time it takes to put these plans together. And I'm not even doing as many as what you guys do. But with the detail and the effort that we put into these things, it's a lot of work besides just showing up at somebody's place. But Great properties, great people. I hope they follow the plan.
Well, you might have seen my social media post. After I got done with my consulting visit yesterday, I found out while I was on that visit that client and his son were the winners of that Quest deer competition. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I've seen advertisements for it. I'm not real familiar with it, but they were the winners for the state of Illinois 2 years ago. And that same year, I had a client from Ohio, and him and his son were winners in Ohio. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And then, I got to thinking that same year that those guys shot those bucks, in the month of October only, I had 3 clients shoot 200 inchers, 2 more shoot bucks in the 190s, and another client shoot a buck in the 180s. And as I got to thinking about all that on my drive home from that consulting visit, it really struck me that those guys all followed the plan. They didn't deviate from the plan. They tried to follow it as close as they possibly could, and that's what led to their success. And when you start doing dozens and even hundreds of properties, you're going to have clients in every range, from the guy that follows the plan to the letter to the guy that throws it in the trash and does something totally different. And what I've seen over the years is those clients who totally buy in, who throw all their preconceived ideas out the window and start fresh and just follow that plan as close as they possibly can. Those are the guys that 2 or 3 or 4 years later are calling you up and telling you what a great difference it made in their property. And sometimes it doesn't even take that long. I had another interesting conversation on the way home from that visit as well with Wes Delks. And he ran into a client of his from a couple of years back. And this client had one of those guys come in with the drones with the thermal or whatever and do a herd survey of his property. And this guy was really excited to share with Wes that he implemented Wes's plan, as close as he could, had this drone fly in to take a herd survey. And on about 100 acres that this guy owns, there was over 50 deer on his property, and they flew all the surrounding properties around him, and there was only 2 deer that they could find on all the properties surrounding that guy. Over 50 on his property, and only 2 on all the neighbors surrounding it. And I just think that is proof positive of what we're saying, but also what we're trying to accomplish when we go on these visits. And I just can't stress enough, if you paid that kind of money, and let's face it, it's not cheap to hire us to come to your farm, give it a chance, guys. At least buy in for 2 or 3 or 4 years and give it a real chance. And don't try second guessing things. Don't try pulling pieces of this plan, ideas you've seen on the internet, and you heard this guy say this. Forget everything you've seen. Buy into the plan 100%. Follow it for a minimum of, I'd say, 3 years, and see what a difference it makes.
The problem people have, though, Don, that I see is that everybody wants us to come on the property and give them this magic bullet that they can still hunt the same way that they've always hunted. And at the end of the day, our plans have a lot to do with the habitat. It has a lot to do with the environment, but it's mostly about how to hunt it with pressure and picking the spots that we have access to and then changing the habitat to exploit that access. And we talked about this extensively at the masterclass this year. We had just super great guys at the masterclass. And I think almost every class got into this dialogue, and that is, just because something worked once in 1999 and the client shot a big deer, it's not going to be consistent. And the people that struggle with this are the ones that they'll put the money into habitat work. They'll put the money into TSI or logging or switchgrass. They refuse to change how they hunt. And, I had one incident this year with a client that after about 3 hours of touring his property, I just basically excused myself from the project and told him that I wasn't going to do anything. He could keep his money, but there was no use me even spending time putting a plan together because he wasn't going to listen. And if I did do a plan, all he was going to do was complain that it wasn't going to work. But I knew that he would not implement it. He wasn't going to change. And I think Wes was very stern with me about being very careful about, pre-interviewing your clients and making sure they're on board before you invest the time to go there. That's a big part of what we do, is send a series of questions, an email or phone dialogue to make sure that the person that we're going to be working with is really willing to be on the same page with us. But most of it's how we hunt and then setting the property up to exploit it.
Yeah, and to your point, Terry, I see it too, that you go on a property and the client will have a favorite stand or two or three, and they are right in the heart of the property where the access is absolutely terrible. There's no good wind direction that you can even hunt there, but yet they had success there and they just can't give it up. And a big part of what we do is, and it was that story I just told with the guy flying the thermal drone just is proof positive. We got to get those deer bedding on your property first, and especially those mature bucks. We got to get them bedding there, and if that means you got to give up some of your stands, even
Right.
your favorite stands, you got to give them up to get those deer bedded there, and then you got a real chance to kill the ones you want to kill. There's another situation that Wes and I spoke about, a client that I'd been to this client's place twice, and Wes was going there as well, and the guy is just not seeing the bucks that he wants to see. And the question I asked Wes, are these bucks on his trail cameras? Is he seeing the caliber of bucks that he wants to see? Because if the bucks are there, we should be able to kill them.
Yeah.
But in this situation, the bucks are not there. He wants to kill bigger bucks than what he is seeing for several years. There's a limit on each property. There's a ceiling on each property. And a lot of that has to do with not what you're doing on your place, but what your neighbors are doing. You can be doing everything right, and your neighbors are shooting your bucks at 3 years old, and you're never going to shoot a 5-year-old because of that. So there's a lot of limiting factors, but I also want to go back to what I said about, all the success that my clients had a couple Octobers ago. We do things different, and we spend considerable time giving thought to how we can be the best in the business at what we do. We don't want to be second best. We want to be number one as far as whitetail consultants. And I don't think that if you took every other whitetail consultant out there, and this is going to sound arrogant, and I don't mean it that way at all, but I just want to use it as an example of how different we are. You could take every other consultant out there and all of their clients, which would outnumber our clients probably 20 to 30 to 1, and their clients in that month of October probably did not have the success that my couple of hundred did. And I know you guys that are part of the dream team, I see your plans. You're laying things out exactly as they should be laid out for these clients. And if they will just give it a chance, that's the most frustrating thing for me, is a client that if he would just listen, his success would improve, but yet he refuses to even take the first step. And it's almost as bad as the guy that he'll listen to part of it, but yet he heard something on the internet that some guy said on the internet, or some video he watched on the internet, and that just makes sense to him. So he's going to throw that in the mix as well. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I really like, and we've kind of beat this with a dead horse, but I really like meeting new people and spending time with them, meeting their families. I did a job about a month ago in the similar area about 45 minutes from where I was today. But the guy lives out of state, but he bought a farm and it had a house on it. So I'd never met the guy, and he says, well, you can stay at our house. We got a hunting house there that is on the property. There's no use getting a hotel. So he let me stay there that night. Well, that guy ended up buying the demo bike from Quiet Cat. That Quiet Cat gives us a bike every year. They want us to use it, let our customers use it, try them out, and then they sell them at a discounted rate to our consulting clients. Well, I delivered it last night. Well, he wasn't in town. He just gave me I got the key to the gate. He said, go in and drop it off. But, Western Kentucky, once again, every time I go to Western Kentucky, there's tornadoes and storms down there, just like it was when we were in Nashville last couple months ago. He just said, crash at the house. He told me where the key was and just turned his house loose to me without anyone there. But I tell you, I got up this morning and looked out over the front porch about where we had, Don, we changed the whole aspect of this farm and moved all of the food up to the front where he had access to hunt, reorganized all the bedding. And I look out and I already see a short section of fence. I see apple trees, tubes, fruit tree tubes already planted. I saw one of his tower blinds moved into a spot where he's going to do a miscanthus screen around it, and immediately texted him. I'm like, man, that's awesome, because it's only been like 3 weeks. And the best compliment I ever got was this whole year is he said, you do not have to worry about one sentence in that plan not being followed. He said, it makes perfect. He said, it's so simple, it makes sense. So I think that's what people really are so surprised about when we put all this detail in. It's so simple, it makes sense.
Yep. I want to read a text I got from Bobby Worthington yesterday. Bobby had just done a consulting visit. And, I'm in contact with you guys on the Dream Team on a pretty consistent basis, pretty regular basis. And definitely you guys are sending me your plans. But Bobby said, and I quote, the guy I just finished up with today is an Amish guy in Ohio. He is just tickled to death with the work we have done. He hired a guy named, I won't mention the name, from Michigan. I think it was last year, and said that was the biggest waste of money he's ever done. He said the guy never got off the four-wheeler and just pointed out places to hunt from. He never got in the woods. When he questioned about the wind, he needed to hunt certain places. This guy said, quote, don't worry about the wind, just hunt. He said he knew then he had wasted his money on that guy. This guy also told him, if you see a big buck out in your field that you can't kill with your bow, then don't worry about it. Just wait till gun season opens and kill it with your gun. I guess he thought the buck would still be there walking around in the field for a few weeks. He said things that guy told him was the most ridiculous stuff he had ever heard in his life. Because of his dealings with him, he was a real little reluctant to hire me at first, but he was sure glad he did. We walked every inch of his property and found a lot of great stand locations, and he learned a tremendous amount about picking stand locations. We have a good plan in place that he is excited about. End of quote. So this guy had a bad experience with another consultant, and I can understand why, because I know who that other consultant was. But not to bash other consultants, but even on our dream team, there are guys that are better fits for different properties. And I suggest to people that if you want to hire anyone on the team, I don't care if you don't want to hire me because I'm too expensive. That's fine. That doesn't hurt my feelings. There's no hard feelings whatsoever. I still want to put you with the guy that's the best fit for you. And Bobby is a guy that if you're just looking for stand sites, especially if you got rough ground, mountainous type ground that's mostly all wooded, and you don't want to do a complete habitat makeover, Bobby is the guy that'll come in there and he'll walk every inch of that ground, and he'll tell you where to put your stands, and you're going to have the best chance you could ever have on that property. Now, if you had a property that needed a lot of habitat projects, if you wanted to implement food plots and you had a blank slate and you wanted to, locate those food plots in the best places and create sanctuaries in the best places and create huntable travel patterns, well, then, there's other options there that I think would probably be a better fit. And it goes right on down the line. Each one of us on the dream team has a strong point and a weak point. And I try to place the right consultant on the right property. And I think that's just an option that most consultants don't offer because they're just one guy. And most of those guys are going to take every job that comes along. They don't care where you're located. They don't care anything about your property. And one of the reasons for setting up the dream team was that I want to be able to plug in the right consultant to the right property. So,
and we're going to continue to meet and adapt and see how we can do better. We're not satisfied with where this is at. I will tell you though, if you want to get on the schedule for next year, reach out to Don, go over with what you want, reach out to us. It doesn't matter. But I know I've already talked to Wes. We need to try to book, like for me, I'm going to book more properties in between Christmas and New Year's and early January in states that are done or people who have already tagged out than what I did this year, because I don't want to go as late into the spring, because I stay in a pretty small radius from home. And today was probably too late. If the family that had the farm today was really going to be doing a lot of timber work, we were there too late. Now, luckily, a lot of the work that they're wanting to do is more switchgrass related, so it'll be okay. But timber work, when we're making those recommendations, we're already 2 months late for that. So if you want on the list for next year, make sure you get with us and start that process as early in the year as we can. So let's take a quick break and listen to a spot from Osseo, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about projects that we're getting ready to prepare for on Don and I's farm this spring.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear. Prepare to be invisible.
All right, Don. Well, thanks to the folks at Osseo. Let's talk a little bit about some stuff. We had a torrential downpour yesterday, so it's really wet. I'm probably delayed at least a week getting miscanthus in the ground. And I know you got a lot of big projects. Let's start with yours. What habitat work you got cooking here now that consulting season's over?
Well, this week I got to plant some persimmon trees one day. I've been doing some tree stand work. In fact, I spent the day out in the cold wind today working on tree stands. Anybody that's following along on the Whitetail Master Academy, I'm putting daily videos out when I'm out doing these projects just to give you an idea of what I'm doing from day to day in an attempt to kill these giant deer. But this coming week, I've got more trees to plant if possible. I've got another tree stand to get in place. I need to take a couple of stands down and do some work on them. But I'm really just waiting for the weather to break as much as anything. Got some TSI work I want to do in a couple of areas on the new 40 that I just got. And then another property that sits down the creek that I've owned for a few years. I want to do some TSI work in there, but the list is long.
Did you end up getting your switchgrass field burnt?
I did, yeah. When Austin Razor was here last week, I think it was last Monday, the wind was perfect. That first morning he was here, and the first thing we did was set that thing on fire.
Did you find any backburn? Did you find any sheds after letting the masterclass guys walk through it?
Nope, there wasn't any sheds out there.
Huh.
But
so they all picked them clean, the ones that were there. In my place, I need it to dry out a little bit, but we talked about it last year. I have one spot on the farm that I really need a tree stand in, and there's not a tree, but there's about 15-foot cedar trees that are not big enough to even lean a ladder stand in. So I'm going in with an auger on the back side of it as soon as it's dry and putting a telephone pole in the ground right on the back side to where basically my body's going to be right in the top of a group of cedar trees. So I'm creating a spot to put a tree stand in. I can't use a tripod. It's got too much of a contour on the side. I'd have to take a mini excavator in there and dig a hole on the high side in order to get it where I would need to. So this is going to be the easiest way, but need it to dry out a little bit. And then I'm going to put in a new elevated blind on my place with a miscanthus tunnel going out to it to get a little bit better angle and where the deer are coming out of the food plots. With a little bit different wind. One of the problems on my property is that I need just a little bit better wind than what I have right now. And I'm going to be able to shift that blind over just a little bit to take advantage of it.
Well, sounds like you're in the same boat as me. You got a long list and short amount of time to get it done.
Yep. All right. Well, let's go ahead. If it's all right with you, let's go ahead and put the first question up. And then after we get done with that first question, I'll make an announcement about Lester's feet. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan. All right. The first one comes from Kevin Barr from Wabash, Indiana. He says, "Hello, Don and Terry. Thank you for your wonderful podcast and all the work you do with Lester's feet. I also love your straight up way of telling it the way it is. This question is for both of you. I live in Indiana and we can supplemental feed in the off season. I read in a bow hunting magazine that if you start feeding deer before the fawns start dropping, the does will have them close to the feeders and cause the coyotes to start hunting close to the feeders to get the fawns. I have a hard time really believing this because if that were the case, does would have them along field edges where they normally eat anyway. I was wondering what your thoughts on this, since Terry can feed all year round. Wouldn't that mean he would never have fawns? Thank you again for a great podcast and keep up the great work. Hope the work on your new 40 acres is going well and you both have a great upcoming season. God bless." Well, Kevin, the reason I picked your question is it is a perfect example of the nonsense that's out there on the internet. And I've said it before. I believe over 50% of the deer hunting advice on the internet is garbage. And this is absolutely makes no sense. You supplemental feed and what the does don't go anywhere. They just lay there at the feeder and squirt out fawns 10 feet away. I mean, it makes no sense. And I'm sure I'm exaggerating just a little bit, but you know, those Mother Nature has equipped those does or given them the I don't know, the good sense, if you will, to have those fawns in places where those fawns are the safest. And you know, one trait that a lot of hunters may not be familiar with that does do is that when they have twin fawns, those twin fawns don't lay together. Those fawns are separated, and sometimes they could be 100 yards or more apart, and that's to protect them from predators. If a predator gets one fawn, the chances are really good that the other fawn will survive. So, you know, Mother Nature has taken care of these critters for, you know, eons, decades, centuries, whatever. And some clown on the internet dreaming up reasons not to supplemental feed. It's just total garbage.
I have a theory here. I think the guys that think up stuff like this are watching those old cartoons with the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, where the coyote's trying to like hide behind a cactus with some rocket ship strapped to his back that he got from the Acme company. And a predator is going to adapt and hunt just like we adapt and hunt as humans. Bobcats, coyotes, no matter what the situation is, they're going to find opportunities to hunt. That's how they survive. And we could get as sarcastic as we wanted with this one, but you know, I love it, the fact that Kevin's actually using common sense in his question. He backed into the answer himself, and heaven forbid someone use common sense. But good job, Kevin. We're proud of you that you were able to do that. Just complete nonsense.
I could jump on a soapbox here pretty easy, but
I
I'll
think
try to
they're
take the high
watching. I
road.
think they're watching Looney Tunes when they're coming up with this stuff. Let's take a small sapling tree and bend it over and tie it to the ground, and a deer's going to bed underneath of it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, if it's the right tree, a buck will bed there, and if it's the wrong tree, a doe will bed there. So depending on how you bend that tree over, you can either have a buck bed in there or a doe bed in there.
Is that where
And
the
you know what?
statement? Is that where the statement "bend over and I'll show you" came from?
Well, I don't know about that, but
Hey
yeah,
Don, bend over and I'll show you.
we better go on to the next question before I get fired up here, Terry, because I could take this in another direction and probably offend some people.
Well, let's refocus here. I actually the question that you read, the first one, was not the first one that I meant to put up, but this is the one we held over from last week. So let's do this one before I do the Lester's Feet segment.
All righty, this one comes from Luke Hooper from Fisher, Illinois. He says, "Hey Don and Terry, I have a couple of questions. One, do you have personal experience with the attractiveness of chestnuts? I've heard and read all over the web how much deer love them, but would like to know if you or someone you trust can give us some anecdotal evidence on how great they are for deer and other wildlife. Number two, I've done a bunch of research on prescribed fire. I suggested for you to do a video on burning your switchgrass fields on the Whitetail Master Academy, which I love, by the way. My question is about burning timber. I see a lot of experts that burn timber similarly to the way most burn prairie, every 3 years or so. Coupled with opening the canopy and burning the litter on the ground, that seems to enhance the explosion in growth. I believe you had mentioned on a podcast before that you saw a wood somewhere that they burned, but it was way too clean down low for cover or browse. But if memory serves me, you said they burned it every year, thus keeping the growth set back too frequently to establish. Thoughts? Look forward to the podcast every week and the newest Whitetail Master Academy video uploads." Well, Luke, as far as chestnuts, I can offer some insight basically from firsthand experience, but also a few years ago, I did an article on chestnuts for North American Whitetail, and as part of that research for that article, I interviewed a chestnut expert, if you will, from the University of Missouri, and another one from Ohio State University. And
Hey, that's the nut school. They got to know what they're doing. That's the nut school.
yeah, Buckeye. But I also, I had the tree business where I had a tree nursery where we grew a lot of trees and potted trees in greenhouses, shade and landscape trees in the field and whatever. But here's a very interesting experience from my days with the tree business. There was one spring where we were starting in these greenhouses various oaks from seed and chestnuts from seed. So I had thousands of these little pots that we was planting the acorns in. I floated the acorns to make sure I was planting good, viable seed and everything. And, I would have a section where I would have like 500 swamp white oaks, and next to it, I might have 1,000 bur oaks. Next to that, I may have 600 or 800 pin oaks or whatever. And thousands of these trees in this big greenhouse. And then I had an area where I had probably 500, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 chestnuts. And this greenhouse, it was open greenhouse. I didn't start these things till weather broke in the spring. So it was open. It basically had a shade cloth over the top of it instead of plastic, and a sprinkler system in there to keep those trees watered and everything. But so I'm watering these trees in these pots, and all of a sudden all these oaks are popping up. But my chestnuts, there was nothing growing in my chestnut pots. I don't remember 500 to 1,000 pots sitting there in one section, and there wasn't a single chestnut tree coming up. And I'm thinking, what in the world's going on with the chestnuts? So I started digging around in those pots, and all the nuts were gone. Every one of the nuts and every single chestnut pot was gone. Hundreds of them was gone. And what happened was the squirrels came in there, and I'm not kidding you. The squirrel and this shade house was a good 100 yards plus from the woods. The squirrels came in there, and somehow they smelled those chestnuts planted in the ground and in pots, and came in there and took every one of them out. And the reason I know it was squirrels is because they took some of those chestnuts, and then they went and they planted them in other pots that had the oaks growing in them. And so I had pots that had 2 trees coming up. They had an oak tree, and then they had a chestnut that the squirrels had moved. And plus, they planted these chestnuts all around the outside of this shade house. And so that told me the attraction to those chestnuts was just absolutely unreal, that those squirrels 100 yards away in the woods knew that I had those in them pots, and then they got in that greenhouse and they knew which pots had the acorns and which ones had the chestnuts.
That's
So
crazy.
absolutely, it is. It's unbelievable. And then, I've got chestnuts on my farm now that have been planted several years, and they're producing chestnuts. And I'm telling you, when them things are falling, it's like the deer, the squirrels, the raccoons, everything is fighting to get the acorns or the chestnuts as soon as they hit the ground. And you just can't find one on the ground. You'll find them holes, the burr, have the little spiny burrs holes or husk. Yep. You'll find them all over the place, but the nut itself, you will not find one on the ground. If you do, it hadn't been there but minutes, because they'll just devour them. So yeah, the chestnut is unbelievably attractive to deer. Now I want to take that in a little bit different direction just to help everybody out. The big rage is the Dunstan chestnut, which is supposedly a cross between a Chinese and a Dunstan chestnut. Well, when I did my article for North American Whitetail, I'm not the most politically correct person, Terry. That might surprise you, but
really?
I'm really not. Yeah. And my article got edited a little bit before it made the magazine and got printed. But both of those chestnut experts, the one from the University of Missouri and the one from Ohio State University, both of those guys suggested to me that they thought the Dunstan was probably nothing more than a Chinese chestnut with some fancy marketing behind it. And the reason they said that was they said they didn't see a single trait in the Dunstan chestnut to make them see anything from the American side, the American chestnut side of that cross. They said they couldn't tell it from a Chinese chestnut. And to be honest, I've got both Dunstan and Chinese growing on my farm, and I can't tell the difference either. If I was going to plant chestnuts, and I'm still planting them today. In fact, Austin Razor and I planted some last week. I'm only planting Chinese chestnuts. Save your money. Just buy Chinese chestnuts, and they'll do just as well as these high dollar ones that are sold, as deer chestnuts or whatever they are.
Wonder if that one feller that bashes you so bad about non-native stuff has any chestnuts planted anywhere.
That guy don't have any nuts in his pants, I'll tell you that. And as far
Bend over and I'll show you.
That guy's just totally off his rocker. Wait a minute, Luke had another question.
Oh yeah. That's a good one, because we talked about this one with Dr. Strickland about burning the forest floor.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, I think burning definitely has its place. As far as burning the woods, I don't know that in the Midwest it's that great of an idea based on what I've seen. I think you can, when a woods has been logged and you got treetops, or even if you have storms blow through and you got down trees and big tree limbs and such, that's good cover. Why would you want to burn it up? And I think a chainsaw is a much better tool than fire in the hardwoods of the Midwest. Now in the South, where you got these big pine woods and such, I think that's a totally different situation. I think I'm no expert whatsoever down there, and I'll follow Dr. Strickland's lead there. I think fire has its place, and maybe it does in certain situations in the Midwest. I don't know if it'll control invasives or not, If it does, then that would definitely be a good tool to use on controlling invasives. But from what I've seen, I think a chainsaw is a much better tool than a fire.
But if I remember right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, the big point that Dr. Strickland made about burning woods was you have to open the canopy up before you do it. And I think what people do is they don't open the canopy up, they burn the understory, and then no light still gets to the bottom. You still have to have a light. And Dr. Strickland said that the big misconception is you can just go in and burn timber thinking it's going to stimulate growth. You have to open up the canopy first with select harvesting. Then down in the South, they use burn to stimulate and also keep these saplings young and thriving instead of, getting too big. And it's like we talk about when we lose grass in old pasture, we've already lost it. We need to keep cutting it back or, mulching it or whatever, so that we still keep it open enough that there's grass. But that was a point that I'd never really thought of. And I'm guessing the farm that you talked about, where one side of the road had been burnt and the other side hadn't, there probably wasn't an opening up of canopy, and they burn it, and then there's nothing under the bottom.
Yeah, and that situation was in Missouri, where there was a logging road that went right down this ridge, and I was driving down it with the client, and one side of that road had really nice thick cover, great deer cover in my opinion. The other side had absolutely no understory whatsoever, and yet the canopy was the same on both sides of that road. And I finally asked the client, what's the situation here? I mean, the canopy's the same. Why is one side of this road so much thicker? And he says, well, we burn the one side every year. This road is what we use as the fire break. We come in with leaf blowers. We blow all the leaves off of this road so the fire can't get past it. And then we burn, the one side. And his biologist is a big turkey and quail guy. And so they want to burn that on a regular basis to get rid of that really thick stuff. And apparently it works for turkeys and quail, but if for deer, you want that understory.
Yep. All right. Well, Luke, thanks for the question. I'll also note, if you want more, unbiased, unpolitically correct feedback about chestnuts, go listen to Mike Morgan's YouTube channel called Outdoors with the Morgans. Him and Don Higgins do not overlap in any place, shape, or form. Mike has a channel that's about cutting firewood and a sawmill and running heavy equipment, but he talks all the time about the chestnuts in his front yard and how many deer are pulling into even right up against his house eating the chestnuts when they're dropping. So another guy that's not sugarcoating anything. Outdoors with the Morgans YouTube channel. Go watch it, subscribe to it. Real big popular channel, but he talks probably once a month about chestnuts in his yard. All right.
Sounds like a real neat guy.
Yeah, you ought to watch it. It's quite entertaining. He just got a new sawmill today. I was watching the video earlier. So, all right, let's take a quick break, and I want to make and it's going to be, I'm going to tease everybody up a little bit, but I have to do it this way because we're still getting some details done. Everyone's been asking about doing a raffle this year for Lester's Feet. And there's a couple elements to this that I want to be transparent about. Number one, until our foundation, we are nonprofit, as approved by the IRS, but until we're more mature and have been in existence longer, it's very difficult for us to hold a raffle by ourselves. So if you remember last year, Don's home church helped us do that raffle. Well, as most of you know, I think Don mentioned it on the podcast, his minister passed away of cancer. And we just didn't really feel it was a good thing right now to ask the church to do that for us again with everything they have going on. It's just a paperwork nightmare. Our government makes it so hard to help people. I could get off on a rant about that, but I'll save it. So I think we've decided as a board to hold off and not do a raffle in the year 2023. By the time 2024 rolls around, we will have been in existence long enough. We can do things on our own and don't have to rely on other organizations like Don's church to help us. It was a hard decision because we know so many of you guys want to support us. But the good thing about our foundation is we are on the monthly giving list of so many people now, whether they're tithing or they just send donation checks, that we have not turned down anyone for lack of funding. So we're getting more and more requests, and to be brutally honest, a lot of those requests are total bogus. I don't mind being accountable to everyone who's supported this foundation. There's a lot of people that want welfare, and that's not, we are trying to be good stewards of why you donated money to Lester's Feet. And if it's a welfare case, we just respectfully decline. If it's a family that has a loss of income due to a child having a serious illness or treatments, that's what we're for. So the good news is we're able to keep up with everything. We're not turning people away. So we're just going to hold off and wait. Now, saying that, we've decided that we're going to hold a huge event this year. And I know a lot of people that can participate in the raffle can't participate in the event. But we have some really good ideas that are being driven, and we're actually going to let a lot of the youth in our community help be a part of this. So I'm proud about it because not only are we going to raise money for a good cause, but we're also teaching the next generation about giving to others and servant leadership. So believe it or not, it's not a surprise to us. One of my youngest daughter was the one that had this idea. So I'm not going to say any more about it. She's still trying to get some approvals done with what she wants to do with the vision of this, but the board has voted and are supporting it, that this is what we're going to do in 2023. It will be later on in the year. Let's just say I had to call Joe Miles immediately to make sure he was on board, and he was very excited about the idea. So we can't wait for all of us to basically hold a huge event. Venue's going to be a problem, Don, because I think a lot of people, if we give them enough notice and we plan this thing properly, there's going to be a lot of people that want to come to this. So I'm really excited about it. And we're going to do this for 2023 to raise money for the families with sick children. So no raffle this year, but thank you so much for everybody who keeps asking. And as soon as we have a few more approvals, I'm probably going to be on this podcast asking for help for people making some connections for everything from venues to live music to other stuff. So it's going to be a good time.
Yeah. And do you have a timeline, even a month, when you think this is going to happen?
I think we're going to do it right after the beginning. It's probably going to fall in January of 24 because we know that people will not come during hunting season.
I wasn't sure if it's going to be this summer.
I don't know that the way they want to put it together, if we're going to be able to do it before summer. If we can, we're going to try. It's either going to be in late August, early September, or in January. And we might even... Honestly, we might even look at, since we have a lot of big events scheduled for the Shipshewana, Indiana show, and we're so close with the promoters of that show, we got to get a little bit further with the details. We might even combine it and do it at that show. That's something that we've talked about, that we might need to potentially run by the promoters of the Shipshewana show, and everybody can come to the event and go to a trade show. So a lot of details yet, but the big news right now that I'm allowed to talk about is no raffle, but we're going to do a really big event. So hope everybody understands. I'll keep you posted as we go. We're not sharing a whole lot about families right now, and unfortunately that's because of legal reasons. There's some very strict privacy laws that attorneys have been involved in, so we have to be very careful about what we specifically talk about as it relates to minors with health issues with HIPAA and stuff. So I know people kind of miss those Lester's Feet segments where we have a talk about a family, but unless they're willing to step out on a limb and do what some of them have done, we are very hesitant in sharing stuff without their permission. So that's the story on that. Did I miss anything?
Nope, that event's going to be fantastic. So I'm sure a lot of the listeners will be there. It's going to be huge. It'll be something you will remember.
I think it's what they're talking about is going to be, it's going to be awesome. I think everybody's gonna really like it. So we're gonna do it right. And the thing that I'm most proud about is not only are we doing this as a way to raise money, but just another opportunity to instill in the young people of our community and the others that want to help with this thing how using servant leadership is the way to be blessed. And I know our sponsors, as soon as we mention anything about this publicly, they're going to want to be on board for however they can help and participate. I know Joe Miles was ecstatic about all of it. So I can't wait to navigate this a little bit more through the spring and announce stuff as we go. All right, let's move on to our next question here.
All right, this one comes from Isaac Nilsson from Wilson, Wisconsin. He says, Don and Terry, thank you for all the information you provide and for what you do with Lester's feet. My question is, why should I or should I not leave diversity pockets in my switchgrass fields? A certain hunting YouTube celebrity and suddenly seed expert, who in order to buy seed from, you'll have to take out a second mortgage, likes to preach diversity pockets and switchgrass, but I'm not sold on the idea, and I figured you guys would have some thoughts. Thank you for your time and God bless. Well, Isaac, diversity pockets, and by that you're meaning different types of cover within that switchgrass, tree plantings, for example, shrubs. I think in theory, it's a good idea, but in practice, it's a terrible idea. I've actually tried this on my property with planting large trees. I'm talking large burlap trees that would cost you several $100s a piece to go buy them. And the thing with switchgrass, and the reason it's a bad idea is because you've got to burn your switchgrass. You've got to burn that switchgrass to keep a good stand of switchgrass going and not have it turn into a weed patch. And these diversity pockets, most of them are not going to survive fire. Can you imagine what would happen if you've got a switchgrass fire with flames 20 feet tall running through your spruce pocket or whatever that you've planted out in your switchgrass? Again, in theory, it's great, but in reality, it's a bad idea. I can't tell you how many, probably thousands of dollars it cost me in burned up trees trying to do this. And just not a good idea. Guys, a lot of what I share with you, I learned it the hard way. I made the mistakes. And I'm here.
That's what I was just getting ready to say. This isn't that you're bashing someone else. This is you've done it and it's failed.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds good in theory, but I've done it. And I've spent thousands of dollars on these giant trees thinking those trees were big enough they would survive a fire, and they did not. It's a terrible idea. First-hand experience. I strongly urge you not to do it.
Yep. All right. Well, let's we're running a little bit behind, but I want to get these questions in. Let's go to question number 3.
I think this is number 4, Terry. But anyway, Tom Campbell from St. Paul, Minnesota says, hi, Don and Terry. Greetings from communist Minnesota. Hey, Tom, I'm from communist Illinois. So we got something in common. He says, hey, thank you for everything you do for us fellow deer hunters. Been listening to your podcast from the beginning. Truly the best podcast out there. Well, thank you. My question is for Don. Do you think the new buck you are chasing, the Chasing Giant 200, is related to Mel? Same genetics. Keep up the great work, guys, and God bless. I'm guessing there's a good chance that somewhere down the line they probably are. They both got that giant frame, and Al Foster made a good point here recently. I had lunch with him and Joe Johnson, and we was talking about my property's ability to crank out giants, and Al says, well, you got those bucks, you got that genetic pool with big frames, long main beams, widespread, and you add those long beams up, and you add that widespread in there, and you gain a lot of inches right there. And that's a trait that I've definitely got on this property. It doesn't mean that every buck's got it for sure. In fact, most bucks don't have it, but I do have I'm going to say a small percentage of bucks come along that do have those traits. And if I can keep those bucks alive to 5-6 years old, most of the time they turn into giants. I'm hoping that by adding this new 40 acres that I'm able to keep a lot more of them alive, because I've lost some bucks that I'm pretty sure would have, if they'd have lived, they would have been 200 inches down the road. And I lost them young at like 2 and 3 years old. And I'm thinking of one right out of the gate that he was killed as a 2-year-old that had 15 points, and he had it all going on. He was going to be really special, but I'm guessing there probably is some relation there somewhere, but there's really no way to tell. In fact, I looked at doing a DNA sample on to compare those two bucks. I was going to take a sample of antler from each one shed antler and send it in to a place called DNA Solutions in Oklahoma City, and which is a place that a lot of the captive breeders use to confirm parentage on their deer. And they told me that was not a test that was possible. That they could tell parentage on those deer if I had the samples from the animals to compare them to, but just two random animals to say, yeah, they're related, and how they're related, that they were not able to do that test.
You look at the frame of the buck that you're documenting this year. I actually see a few more similarities in Smokey than I do Mel, but that's just me. I don't know. To get a buck to this caliber, Trump was a rare one. He was in the 190s and did not have a wide frame. He just had a lot going vertically. It's really, really hard to get a 200-inch deer that doesn't have that huge wide frame on it. Unless it's just got a ton of non-typical points. But to get that big, when we're talking 214, 220, those type of scores, they got to have that big frame and big tines and a lot of mass. That's how you make up all of that.
Yep. And lots of tines.
Yeah.
It ain't going to happen with a clean 9 or even a clean 10.
Wildlife Farming is the leading e-commerce platform specializing in habitat management equipment. Our mission is to make available the equipment necessary for the development of wildlife habitat and improve conservation for hunting and recreational property. We carry flagship brands like the Genesis Drill and Goliath Roller, as well as the premier brands in planting, mowing, spraying, forestry management, and fencing equipment. Food plot and habitat goals vary. Wildlife Farming is the company that can deliver the equipment to achieve these goals. Equipment is our specialty. Our staff is trained and familiar with all the tractor and skid steer brands to make sure you get the right piece of equipment to get the job done right the first time. At Wildlife Farming, we only sell quality equipment, and we have the support and expertise you need. Please visit wildlifefarming.com for all of your equipment needs.
All right, this one was anonymous, submitted from someone in Missouri. It says, Don, thanks for all you and Terry do. Concerning sanctuaries, all things considered, do you prefer them to be in the center of a property, the exterior, or some sort of combination, and why? For those on the exterior, considering hunters on the neighboring property, how important do you feel it is to establish stands on the edge of your sanctuary property to hunt deer as they may leave your property versus the strategy of pulling deer into your property from the opposite side, especially if the neighbor is trying to pull them out of your sanctuary? Lastly, aside from physical barriers, is there any other deterrent that you have found effective to keep mature bucks on your property? Anything utilizing a mature buck's visual senses or their sense of scent, such as dummy hunters, pinwheels, purposefully hunting with the wind blowing into your sanctuary, or even leaving something with an offensive, threatening scent, otherwise known as the West Delk sock method. Well, where do I start there? As far as being able to deter deer from doing what they naturally want to do, I think without a physical barrier, you're not going to be able to do that. That's why fences are becoming more and more popular. I'm telling you, it's got to the point where I bet you half of my consulting clients discuss fences today. That's the only way you're going to keep bucks from doing from leaving or wandering off of your property in a certain direction. As far as the location of a sanctuary on a property, that just varies so greatly. I mean, every property is different, and there's properties that I've designed every conceivable situation. Sanctuary in the middle, sanctuary at one end. Um, split sanctuaries, which I do not like. I prefer one big sanctuary, but there's been situations where the property laid out in such a way there was food in the middle and sanctuaries on both sides of it. There's just no way to really answer that question. I guess the ideal situation is your sanctuary is at one side where you can still hunt the entire perimeter around it, and then you're pulling deer to the other side of the property with a transition zone in between, by creating some really huntable travel patterns. But that's about probably the best I can do with that question.
And what the neighbors are doing. I mean, like today when we were going around the property today, I probably asked more questions about what the neighbors are doing on all the different tracks all the way around you than what was going on the property. It's such a vital piece of the puzzle, knowing where to pull, where to push, where to block. That's the name of the game.
And I do like to hunt the entire perimeter of a sanctuary, even if it butts up to the neighbor's property line. I do like to try, if at all possible, to get stands on that edge. And the reason for it is those bucks are going to want to run the downwind edge of that cover, that sanctuary bedding cover, especially during the rut. Those bucks are going to want to be on that downwind edge, and that's where you need to be. If you're not, you're setting up a situation for your neighbors to take full advantage of. For those of you who watch the Whitetail or on the Whitetail Master Academy, today I just posted a video, as I'm doing, regularly, and I hung a stand today, and I took the video as I was in the stand, and I showed how I was going to access that stand, and then I turned the camera the other direction, and I showed my view, what I'm going to be seeing and what I'm going to be looking at from that stand, and I'm hunting the edge of a sanctuary is exactly what I'm doing. It's right on the edge of the property too. So if you've seen that video, again, it was just put out today, then you're going to get a good handle on what I'm trying to say here is you want to be able to hunt that downwind edge of the sanctuary on all sides. So when the wind changes, you're just changing which side of that sanctuary you're hunting.
Well, tell me I'm wrong with this logic. Let's say I have a piece on the back side of my property that I have no access for, and it's an open clearing that I could either put food or bedding in that open clearing, but I have no way to get to it, and my neighbors hunt the property line on the other side. If that property's me, I'm not putting any bedding or any food there. I'm just keeping it bush hogged down to where it at least keeps an open buffer to where they're not running that property line where they're getting a shot.
I think that's a great approach. Nothing wrong with that approach at all.
Because wherever you put bedding and you have that transition from bedding to open, those bucks will absolutely tear that up in the rut on the downwind side. And you put that situation in a place like Kentucky that has, rifle season during the rut, you're going to get them whacked and stacked right on your property line.
Yeah, I wish everybody could see that video that I filmed today, because it shows it perfectly, what we're talking about here. But you make a great point, Terry. You don't want to help your neighbor you need a buffer. And we've said it many times, we can change our property any way we want to, but what we cannot change is what's right next to our property, what surrounds it. What surrounds our property is way more important than what's on it, because we can change what's on it, but we can't change what's around it.
All right. Well, that's about it. What do you got cooking for this coming week? What do you have planned?
Well, I hope it dries out enough I can plant a bunch of trees. I've got I don't know, probably 500-600 tree seedlings to plant on the new 40, and I'd like to get that done. Got a little bit more tree stand work to do, TSI work as well. I'd like to get in at least one, if not two, consulting visits this week. I've got 2 local ones left, and then I got one in Ohio the following week. I've got to go to Ohio for a meeting out there, and Mark Fisher, the owner of 360 Hunting Blinds, he bought a new property in Ohio, and I'm going to stop in and look at it for him while I'm out there for that meeting. So just trying to get as many of these spring projects done before spring food plot planting season rolls around.
All right. Well, the other interesting tidbit is not next episode, but 2 episodes from now, I'm going to be in Japan. So we have to figure out how we're going to do this, whether we are going to do the first Chasing Giants international podcast with me in Japan trying to do this, or we're going to punt and skip a week, or try to record it early and hope that it's relevant. One of our Amish listeners actually recommended that that episode we play the Great Debate again, because so many of our Amish listeners did not get a chance to watch that. So give us some feedback. What do you want us to try? There's not a foolproof solution in this no matter what we do, but there's going to be a week here where I'm going to be on the other side of the planet. So it's going to create some challenges. So let us know what you think we should do.
You're not going to be speaking Japanese, are you?
I can't do very much, just a little bit.
Yeah. Do we have any Japanese listeners of the podcast?
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I thought maybe some of the people at your company.
We don't have any liberals, but we might have some Japanese.
Well, we welcome everybody, even the liberals. We'll offend them, but that's all right if they want to stick around and listen to it.
Bend over and I'll show you, right?
Too. Yeah. They're God's children too. We'll just share the truth with them.
Yep, there you go. Well, everybody, we appreciate your time. Thanks for listening in. And again, the best thing you can do to help us is leave a comment down below, share, like, subscribe. And for more insight on this chasing 200 buck that Don's talking about, go out to the Whitetail Master Academy. The link's on his Higgins Outdoors website. And we appreciate everybody. Thank you.
God bless. Hope you have a great week, everyone.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.